name is Michael Winhausen. I'm a former prosecutor for the Benton County District Attorney's Office. My belief is the role of the Attorney General, and it's a little more far-reaching than this, but essentially he is, or she, is the District Attorney of the state of Oregon. As the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the state, one of the Attorney General's primary responsibilities should be the protection of victims. While I was a prosecutor here in Benton County, I did work in the Benton County Courthouse, and in 2004, in February, there was an incident involving a young man by the name of Michael Simons. He worked at a residential care facility here in Benton County called the Heart of the Valley, and they specialized in dealing with folks suffering from forms of dementia, including Alzheimer's. Mr. Simons was an employee at this particular facility. The defendant ultimately admitted to raping and sodomizing three separate women at that facility, all suffering from dementia and or Alzheimer's. He was ultimately prosecuted by our office, by myself, and convicted of multiple crimes including rape and sodomy. That case went up on appeal, and the primary issue in the appeal was the claim by the defendant that his confession was inadmissible because there wasn't sufficient corroboration of his confession. The Court of Appeals overturned his conviction, most of his convictions, the ones having to do with the Alzheimer's patients, because essentially they couldn't speak for themselves, which is obviously the case because they were suffering from dementia and Alzheimer's. And in fact, one of the patients was quite elderly, in her 80s and early 90s. The opinion was written by then Court of Appeals Judge Ellen Rosenblum, who is recently been appointed to the position of Attorney General of the state of Oregon. I believe that Judge Rosenblum did have discretion in the case, and for whatever reason she chose to be a part of the panel that overturned his convictions, and this individual, Michael Simons, is now free. This is a case where there was a substantial amount of circumstantial evidence to corroborate the confession, as well as, in my opinion, the admissions that were made by the defendant prior to his confession. And this is what the trial court judge found at the time of the case. She found that there was sufficient evidence in terms of circumstantial evidence and other evidence to corroborate the defendant's subsequent confession. And that's why she found him guilty. I've been paying attention to her campaign to be Attorney General. And one of the things she has repeatedly talked about is her commitment to victims and to make sure that victims are protected and made whole. And unfortunately, her decisions on the bench, and these are, and I'm speaking of one that I'm involved with, but her decisions on the bench seem to belie that stance. The fact of the matter is she chose to interpret the law regarding confessions in a way that that did not protect victims. And you know, there are all kinds of victims that we have being a criminal prosecutor. There are all types of victims in cases. I have a hard time conceiving of a more vulnerable victim than these women who were at this facility. These were women who were suffering from late-stage Alzheimer's and severe dementia, and he raped and sodomized them. And these are people who have no voice. When the election comes up, I'll be voting for James Buechel for Attorney General of the state of Oregon.